You know, every year, the folks that attend our conferences tell us that this opportunity to network and share with one another is one of the most important benefits. And so this year, the whole theme of the conference is just that. It's the power of peers. And as I mentioned, the majority of our speakers, whether it's a keynote speaker or a breakout presenter, they are well-known consumers in a wide variety of fields, and they've been successful in their fields. And our hope, and my hope, is that when you leave this conference, you'll really feel that this whole notion of the power of peers is on your side. It's new friendships, it's new solutions, maybe novel solutions to old problems, and practical tools that will sort of give you a lifetime of wellness.
We're fortunate to have as our presenter today Dr. Maynard Schaefer. Maynard Schaefer, author of Riding Through the Darkness, Easing Your Depression with Paper and Pen, is a science journalist, mental health advocate, and pioneer in using creative writing as a tool for easing depression. Since 1998, she's led a unique creative writing program for people with mood disorders, meeting at Stanford University Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences. This group draws members from across the San Francisco Bay Area and has been recommended by mental health care professionals. Dr. Schaefer, who has bipolar disorder, has lived through severe depressions, and her knowledge and insight allow her to address the fears and concerns of people with these conditions. She speaks on mental health issues, both personal and professional, to audiences including healthcare providers, police officers, community groups, and people with mental illnesses and their families. She served as the West Coast correspondent for Nature, has written on science and medicine for the Stanford News Service, the San Jose Mercury News, and other publications, and has contributed to science textbooks. Dr. Schaefer earned her PhD in biological sciences at Stanford University. Just a brief note before we begin, we'll ask you to hold your questions until the end, where we'll be allowing about 10 to 15 minutes for questions and answers from you to Dr. Schaefer. Please give a warm welcome to Dr. Elizabeth Maynard Schaefer.
The goal of this conference, for many of us, is to find a path to recovery. And creative endeavors, including creative writing, can play a crucial role in recovery. Now, they did for me, and today we'll talk about a little bit about me and how they've helped others, but also how you can use them, and you can start using them to aid in your recovery. I've interviewed quite a few people who have mood disorders about their creative pursuits. And by creative pursuits, I mean anything that's a unique expression of yourself. It might include writing, painting, music, drawing, stand-up comedy, as we heard this morning. And some of the things that people said were as follows. I'm more productive, so my destructive thoughts decrease. Calling myself an artist gives me an identity. Creativity contributes to making a new self for myself. Creativity builds the path of self-knowledge, the beginning of healing for me. As I paint, love blooms from my heart. Love is the most healing emotion. I was very moved by some of those comments, and I think that for many of us, those may really ring true. Raise your hand, if you would, if you use some creative activity as a part of your toolbox or your personal medicine. A lot of people. That's excellent. If that's the case, you already know that this can really be helpful. I'm going to focus today mainly on creative writing. Don't worry, however, if you don't even have an idea of what creative writing is at this point. But I think it's important and hopefully will be applicable to everyone, in part because writing may be the most accessible way to have a creative endeavor and to develop your creativity in other areas as well. If you think about it, you don't even need to go out and buy a box of paints and get lessons or study music for years. You can sit down and pick up a paper and a pen and write. So I'd like to talk today about as I said, my experience and others, but I'd also like to discuss the creative writing group for people with mood disorders that I began and I've now run for 10 years. We meet at Stanford University, and I'll discuss also the birth and development of my book, which is called Writing Through the Darkness. And there are some postcards about that in the back. Let me start with a little bit of my story. I'm a writer. I'm also a person with bipolar disorder. When I was about 23 years old, I began to have major depression on and off. And it cycled on for a few months and off for a few months, and I cycled also with it on the meds for a few months and off for a few months. That went on for about 5 years, and I did manage to finish graduate school and began work as a science and medical journalist. And things began to get much worse. Mainly with depression, but I was then diagnosed with bipolar disorder. And I began to write about personal things. I had here written about professional topics, but here I was writing a little more about personal things, and that was relatively new for me. I journaled a little bit here and there in life, but nothing very serious. Let me read you just a paragraph to let you know kind of where I was at that point. I lay limp on a bed in a simple cinder block room, waiting for more shock treatments, wishing I could roll over and die right there, right then. I was scarcely able to imagine any life after this week's grim stay on the hospital's locked ward. All the pills I was swallowing every few hours were doing nothing, I was sure. Even the electroconvulsive therapy I was receiving every other day, which had worked wonders for me in the past, seemed futile this time. Desperate, I reached for an empty notebook. My brain was too flat and blurred to put together sentences, so I scribbled a list of words about my situation and slammed the book shut. Immediately, I felt some lifting of that black cloud of depression so bleak that it scrambled my thoughts and choked my breath. Things were pretty bad for me when I began writing. But after I left that hospital stay, I went home and felt like, okay, I touched upon writing and it seemed to help. And I didn't quite know what to do with myself at that stage, coming right out of the hospital. And so I sat on the sofa and I wrote. And I wrote, and I wrote, and I wrote. I wrote how I was doing, I wrote what was happening in my life, what I thought was going on with this depression and how it was affecting me, what I thought I wanted to do next, my memories of everything I could think of. I wrote poems and stories, and I began to study writing. I started to go to workshops and so forth. At this point, I wasn't able to work, but I began to do a little bit of studying here and there and reading about writing here and there, and it began to really blossom for me. Well, I began to feel like this is important to me, this is helping. My medical treatments are very important, but my writing is too. So I began this creative writing group for people with mood disorders. And in the last 10 years, we've had hundreds of people take part. These days, we usually have a group of about 15 people or so in every meeting. And we write together, we share what we've written, and we support one another. We witness what other people have written, and we really support one another. And this is something that you can do too. I want to put that idea out there today that you may want to take back to your chapter, your local area, and think about, I love to write. Maybe this is something I want to share with other people as well. It's not difficult to do, and I really give an outline in a whole chapter, nuts and bolts, how you can do this, how you can get started. So let me talk a little bit about what writing can actually do for you. And I think you'll be impressed with some of these things. I know I am. There have now been over 100 peer-reviewed studies, research studies, on writing and healing. And this got started based upon some research studies looking at the health of people who kept secrets in their lives about past traumas. And it turns out that people who've had a trauma or a difficult event in their past and have not talked about it are less healthy than those who have talked about it. Well, psychologists then looked at what would happen if these people wrote about those experiences. So people wrote for 15 to 20 minutes a day for 4 consecutive days about trauma or emotional upset, difficult points in their life, and they discovered some amazing things. First of all, since most of these studies were done on college freshmen, as is often the case, they were able to look at how often students have visited the student health center, both before and in the months after that writing experiment of just 4 days. And they discovered that the visits to the health center dropped by 50% versus those who simply wrote during that period about my grocery list or I remember to do this tomorrow. So that really got people thinking, okay, 50% is a big drop. So at this point, after all these studies that came out of that, people looking at different aspects of writing and healing, there are changes that I can group into 4 groups. There are cognitive changes that result, mood changes, physiological changes, and behavioral changes. And let me just run through a few of those because I think it's really illustrative of how powerful this can be. In terms of cognitive changes, researchers believe that writing organizes overwhelming events so that they then become more manageable. So it's that organization that's key. And that leads to then a clearer understanding of oneself and the events themselves, and leads them to better overall insight. In terms of mood changes, the writing reveals emotions so they can be recognized and resolved. Interestingly, it leads sometimes to a short, briefly sadder mood that tends to dissipate within an hour or so, and then happier emotions than before the writing come through. So there may be a little dip, but then things improve from where they were initially. And looking at large groups of people, including the college freshman groups, they were not looking specifically at people dealing with depression. These were not people who were diagnosed or on meds. These were cross-section of people, so presumably there were a certain percentage of them who were dealing with depression. And there were certainly depressive symptoms in many of the folks, diagnosed or not. And it really became clear that the writing in this 4 consecutive day experiment did lead to decreasing depressive symptoms. There are bodily changes, physiological changes. It can trigger decreased heart rate, decreased blood pressure, decreased pain levels. For example, in patients with rheumatoid arthritis, a very painful illness, this kind of 4-day writing exercise can yield pain reduction for as long as 4 months later. It can lead to altered brain waves. And interestingly, to me as a biologist especially, is that it can lead to an increased immune response. So that patients with HIV/AIDS do this kind of writing actually have a better white blood cell count later than before they've done it. And finally, the research has shown that people talk more, they listen better, they feel more comfortable socially, and amazingly, they may even get jobs more easily. There was a study of executives who were laid off in Silicon Valley in a large cutback in a company, and they were people who were having trouble getting a new job. Well, those who went through this kind of 4-day writing experiment actually got new jobs measurably quicker than those who didn't. And researchers speculate that they must have felt less hostile, more able to connect socially with interviewers, and so forth. So writing to ease depression. As I see them, there are two. First of all, you want to explore yourself and your relationship to the world around you. And then secondly, you want to express what you found and express it in your own unique way. Writing is likely the most accessible of traditional creative endeavors, and it can also help you discover what other creative endeavors you want to pursue. So let's talk about getting started. What can you do that is this powerful and this accessible? All you need to start is a pen and a notebook, or your computer. And if you prefer typing and you're more at home in front of the computer, that's fine too. Although I suggest that you do experiment both ways. Some people find that they get a slightly different voice, a writing voice, when they type versus when they write. A little different physical activity, tactile activity. So you get a notebook or computer, and you need 10 minutes of undisturbed time. You don't need to sit down and have 4 hours, 10 minutes. If you're really caught for time, go with 5 minutes. Then try to gradually lengthen sessions as you go along and build your writing habit, which I believe is the most productive kind of writing. If you can get yourself to the point where you're writing several days a week and you really have that kind of habit, try and bump up the time, say to 20 minutes, and try to ask that of yourself each time. If you'd like to get started right away, let me suggest, I'll give some sample topics, and I'll have more on the DBSA website of things that you might use to get started writing about. But I have a page at the back, and if you'd like to give me your email address, I will even email you a reminder to get started in the next few days and give you a topic to get going on. So if you feel like this is something I'm going to procrastinate on and you want to get started, that may be a way to do it. There are also some postcards back there as well about my book. I understand that there's not any more available here today, but the postcards will tell you about it and how to get it. So I believe that we can boil down the guidelines about how to do this kind of writing to 3 things. First of all, write continuously for the whole time that you've set for yourself. So if you say, I'm going to sit down for 10 minutes, go ahead and keep your hand going, writing across the page for 10 whole minutes, rather than stopping to plan what you're doing or to edit what you're doing. Go ahead and let that go. Secondly, remember this is for you. So it's fine to be sloppy or disorganized. You don't have to write the perfect essay exam that you may have written previously, learned to write previously in middle school. You can decide, well, even before that, you can go ahead and write about whatever you'd like. Start with a particular topic, for example. But if it leads you elsewhere, and you feel like I'm getting off track of that essay I intended to write, or this planned topic I intended to write, if it's leading you elsewhere, that's okay. Go ahead and go with that. Sometimes our minds will lead us to the most important material for us by doing that, by starting in one place and leading to another. So that's all right. After you write, then you can decide for yourself if you want to share it or keep it, and keep it private. I'm going to talk a little more about sharing later, but it's important as you write to write it for you. Don't write it with your mother in mind. You don't write it with your doctor in mind, even your best friend. Write it for you. And the third important rule that I think applies to anyone, but I think is particularly important for those of us dealing with a mood disorder, or a situational depression even. Some folks have used these kind of techniques when they're dealing with the loss of a loved one or the end of a job. And the rule is to challenge yourself, but don't frighten yourself. You want to challenge yourself and dig deeply enough into your writing that it's meaningful for you, if a topic really feels overwhelming, like it's not healthy for you right now, then wait. Okay, wait till another time. It may be a great topic for you to explore in a week or a month or a year. But wait till another time, and you may want to talk with a friend or a therapist first, or your doctor, whoever's an important support person for you, and look into it when the time is right for you. And as you write more, you'll begin to feel more comfortable following your intuition in that way, and learning what's important and useful for me to write, and what I'm not quite ready for yet, but I'm working my way toward. There's a way to structure your writing session, whether you're writing alone or with a partner or in a writing group, that I'm going to lay out now. These are 3 types of exercises, and in order, they're useful in groups that are writing ease depression. But you may want to structure your individual session this way too, if you're able to put some time into it. I've been impressed by how many people have indicated to me that they'd like to start their own group. And this is a way to get started where you really have a structure laid out for you and something to follow. But to make sure that you experiment. Experiment and see what you enjoy, what you find helpful. But this is one way to structure things. First, start with a warm-up exercise. And by that, I mean write for about 10 minutes to engage your writing mind. Get away from the traffic that you just dealt with, get away from whatever was just going on, or the conversation you just had, or the difficult feeling you're going through on that particular day, and do something to just engage that part of your writing mind. Example, describe your childhood kitchen. Describe your childhood kitchen. Now that may sound like a crazy topic. Why would I write on this when I want to write to ease my depression? Well, there's several reasons. First of all, it will engage your writing mind. And you may discover things that come up as you write that never would have come up in just thinking about something. Memories and ideas that you may not have had for 20, 40, 60 years about that childhood kitchen may come up. And when I say describe that kitchen, I want to know the details. I want to know, if I have a pictures of 6 kitchens in front of me, I want to be able to pick out which one is yours. So was there linoleum on the floor? What did it look like? What color was the refrigerator? Were things always spotless on every surface? Or were there always a pile of dirty dishes in the sink? And then look at, well, what happened there? Was it a wonderful memory of mom's meatloaf? Was it a difficult memory of an argument? Was it a huge family gathering around a table? Or was it 1 or 2 people? So consider everything about a particular topic as you go. It may be important, just as this kind of warm-up to get you engaged. It may also, in a way that's very surprising sometimes, lead you into important material. As I was saying earlier, go ahead and follow that if it happens. You may start out writing about that kitchen and discover you're writing about something that's really a major issue for you and your illness right now. A couple of other examples are a memory of a river, or a lake, or the ocean. Don't you remember what experience was there? Or perhaps a sound you love. A sound you love. Second, I like in my workshops to do what I call an exploration exercise. Take about 20 minutes for this, if you can. And this is writing to delve into your emotions and experiences more, including those related to depression. How did you first feel when you were diagnosed with depression or bipolar disorder? How did that feel? a trusted friend. What would you like to tell a trusted friend about your illness? And maybe you haven't had the opportunity or the desire to do so. And going a little farther afield, how have your spiritual beliefs changed since you were a child? Whether you're religious in the traditional sense of the word or not, whether you believe in God or any other particular set of beliefs or not, I believe you have a spiritual life. And think about how those changed since you were a child, and how has that affected your depression and your bipolar disorder. So third, we would move on to something that I usually call a reflection exercise. You can move back to maybe 10 minutes for this kind of thing, and write on a topic that is thought-provoking and allows you still to balance the more challenging feelings that you may have come up with and more enjoyable feelings. So you want to be able to leave on a meaningful but positive note. And that balance might come from examples like this. Describe a mentor you've had. Describe a soothing image of yourself. That might be anything from your cat sitting on your lap, to a favorite place in the mountains, to the arms of a particular person, to your living room couch. Tell the story of a mysterious thing that's happened to you. A mysterious thing. I'm amazed at some of the stories that have come out of that question. Now, you don't have to follow this particular outline of warm-up, exploration, reflection. It's one way to structure things, one way to get started, but experiment and see what works well for you. I suggest that you experiment, too, with the type of writing you're doing, or the genre of writing you're doing. For example, there are some of us who love to write poetry, who've been writing poetry as long as they can remember, feel very passionate about expressing themselves in that way, and are most comfortable with that, who just have poems come to them. If you're a person like that, go ahead, by all means, and write poems. You may want to write other prose pieces as well, but by all means, give yourself that freedom to use that strength of yours. If, on the other hand, you're a person who says, oh my goodness, I don't know how to write poetry, what am I going to do here? And maybe just has bad memories of elementary school and having to learn to rhyme something that didn't feel like rhyming. Go ahead and experiment with poetry a little bit too, but be easy on yourself. One way to get started with some poetry, if you're not a natural poet in the sense that you've already just jumped in your own daily life, one way to get started is go ahead and write some prose, write a paragraph or so in non-poetry form, and just play with drawing lines between some of the words to break up the lines. So consider, if I ended this line of poetry after this word, with the rest on the next line, how would it look on the page? How would it sound when I read it? Would it change the meaning at all? Would it change the emphasis of things at all? So poetry is definitely something that I think is worth experimenting with no matter what, because it will get at a little different part of you. You need to access a little different part of your brain. You may access different emotions. You may access different thoughts, different feelings. is another thing to consider. Some people, again, this is very natural for others of us, it's not. It's a little bit of a stretch. There are some exercises that have been studied in these writing and healing studies that have looked at things like doing an exercise where you write about a situation or event that didn't go the way you wanted it to. Whether it's a huge life issue or a small event of that conversation yesterday, it was a little weird feeling. Go ahead and write that story, but change the ending. Okay? Write it as fiction, changing the ending to one that you would prefer. It turns out that that kind of writing can actually be very empowering. And it may feel emotionally empowering, but it may also give you ideas of how to approach this or how you want to approach it next. And go ahead and be wild in your thoughts. You know, it may be that you win the lottery in the ending that you come up with. It may be that I don't know what, Harry Potter appears and provides a perfect ending for your story. So go ahead and let yourself be free with fiction. Blogging is another way that many people get started. So blogs the word blog is short for web blog, and basically they are running columns, sort of like a newspaper column, that you add pieces to or posts to every so often. And there are many people who blog every single day and talk about this is what I did today or this is what I'm thinking of today. I have a blog and I put ideas and topics for creative writing on it about weekly. And I write some mental health articles and put them there, and that's, for me, what I want to do with mine. But other people, there are many other people who write about their mental illness, difficult situations, how they're coping, conversations with their doctor or other support people. So there are a lot of good blogs out there that you can look at and get ideas for. And it's something that you can either use as a means to share with people in general, or you can make it a private thing. You can set it up so that only a handful of people who you have designated can get to that material. Or you can simply keep an ongoing journal or blog sort of structure at several places online and keep that completely private. The DBSA, in fact, has a great site called, or part of their site called Facing Us. And it includes a place where you can keep a journal. And you can make that private or you can share it as you like. One other thing to experiment with that is popular with many people, I find, is writing a memoir of your illness. A memoir is a little different than an autobiography in that an autobiography generally runs with, this is the beginning of my life, and it runs all the way up to the present moment. It's the whole big story. A memoir is generally a piece of that life. So it may be the 10 years that you worked in Alaska as a chef. Okay, you're going to just focus on that period of time. And you're going to focus on a particular aspect of yourself as well. So it may be how I trained to become a chef and then how my career was fulfilled. It might be my college love life. It could be a lot of different things, but it looks at a particular period. Well, I'm amazed at the number of people who come to me and say, I've already written a lot on a memoir of my illness. These are my years of having a really hard time, really having an illness that has affected me tremendously, changed my life. I want to write about it. And having done that myself, in an unpublished as yet memoir, I think it's very important for a lot of us to process ourselves and our experiences in that way. And also, many of us feel a real pull to share that with other people and to say, hey, this has helped me a lot, learning this about my illness and following this path that I've come along in this journey. Maybe it would help somebody else who's earlier in the journey. So maybe that would be a help. So experimenting with with Memoir is another thing that might be something that really appeals to you and can be very powerful. So I suggest that you follow what feels good to you, experiment, and see what genres jump out at you. But play around with them and challenge yourself a little bit. Finally, I want to talk about sharing your writing. I think it's important to at least consider sharing your writing, whether it's with a close friend, a therapist, a group for writing to ease depression, if you feel comfortable doing so. And that's an important if. In my writing groups and workshops, we generally write for 10 or 20 minutes on a particular topic, and then we go around the table or the room, and each person reads aloud what they've written, and is listened to without critique or negative comments. There's sometimes there are very positive comments, but we're not giving advice, it's not a support group, and we're not critiquing, but we're listening to this person and witnessing what they've written and what they've said and what they've experienced. Well, we generally go around and read these things, but you always have the option to pass. You simply say, I'd like to pass, no questions asked. So you should never feel pushed to share if you're not at that point, or if this is a particular topic that just doesn't feel comfortable to share at this moment. I do know people who go to their therapist with a new piece of writing every week or every so often, share it with the therapist, and leave the appointment, and then write about what happened at that appointment. So they really are using the writing both before, sharing it during, and then writing after each time. There are a lot of different ways you can do it. For those of you who were fortunate enough to hear Kay Redfield Jamison this morning, she had many wonderful lines, but one thing that she said that really struck me was, if you survive mental illness, you have an obligation to give back. Beginning a writing group in your area is one powerful way of giving back. And I encourage that if you feel that that would be a powerful thing for you and your peers. But number two, when it's right for you, sharing your writing can help others and be an important means of giving back too. So when it feels good, when it feels positive, even if you're pushing yourself a little bit, consider sharing that with someone. And maybe someone who's walking a similar road to yours. It can be a very powerful way of giving back. Well, I'd like to just conclude a little bit with questions and say that after that somewhat dire paragraph I read earlier, my medical treatments have helped me tremendously, but my writing has helped me tremendously too. I feel that writing has saved my life, literally, on numerous occasions. I've been healthy for 3 or 4 years now, and I continue to work almost daily on several writing projects, and feel just blessed that I'm able to do that my mind and emotions are working well enough to do that right now. And as a result of feeling better, my husband and I decided in the last 3 years or so that I was well enough that we wanted to try to become parents. And I'm delighted to report that waiting at home for me is a 10-month-old little girl. Adopted a few weeks ago. So it's been a wonderful result for me, and I do think that writing has been an important part of it for me. So, thanks.
Awesome.
Yes?
First of all, thank you, and I just wanted to comment on one thing you said about taking a scenario and changing the ending to what you want it to be. And what I really appreciate about that is I've done that before, and it's allowed me the opportunity to find out that the ending I thought I wanted was not actually what I wanted. healthy acceptance around where I was at, and to stop wanting what I thought I wanted, and to feel more healthy about dealing with what I had. So I'm not disputing the exercise. I think it's really useful. Obviously, it was useful for me. But sometimes it's good to find out that, you know, the grass on this side is green enough, and maybe I just need to find the ways to water it. So thank you.
Thank you. That's a great comment. That when you're writing and changing the ending of a story, what happened to you, you may not find necessarily that the thing you thought you were hoping for is the thing that you truly wanted. That you may discover a different perspective. Recapping that properly. So yes, I think the perspectives that you can find coming out of writing it can be amazing sometimes, very surprising, and it's very empowering to feel like, boy, this was in me all the time, and I didn't know. Thank you.
Yes. I want to thank you so much. I think writing and journaling are the most important things that I do for myself in my life, the most important wellness tools I use. I think one thing is that as a person with a mental health challenge, sometimes it's easy to feel disconnected from yourself. The very fastest way you can feel connected with yourself is to pick up a pen and hit paper.
I agree completely. For myself, that is absolutely true. You write, and first of all, you have something that's tangible. You can actually look at and say, I filled a page today. That may be all I can do today. I may not be able to get out of bed and take a shower, but I filled the page today. And even if I wrote the same sentence over and over and over, I still filled the page today. And that's really something tangible. It can, writing can increase your self-esteem considerably. It can give you a sense of accomplishment. It can do a lot of things very quickly and get you in touch with yourself very quickly. So thank you. Yes, I wanted to really make it clear in this book that, yes, I've been there. I know what it's like to be psychotic, to be suicidal, to be in the hospital, and I wanted people to know that so that they can understand I'm not preaching from somewhere else. The book is essentially a guide to how you can do this, whether it's writing alone, whether it's starting a group, whether it's doing any of those things. But I did work my own story in because I wanted to make sure people understood that.
You know, something you didn't address, and it's a major concern for me. Like you, I had been leading writing groups of just ordinary people. And then I had my diagnosis and had my breakdown and was coming back. And since then, over the period of time, over my recovery, I found it harder and harder to write. It's like Robert Lowell says, the mood stabilizers took my edge off. You know, I was active as a poet, I was writing a lot, and now I look at a pen and I just don't, everything that comes out, it just feels dull. And I do other things, I'm avoiding it. I mean, what can we do for people who have lost that spark and crave it?
Yeah, it's a tricky question. I do address the issue of meds versus, or other treatments versus creativity. And it's generally not an either-or kind of thing, thank goodness, but it does become an issue for some people. There was a woman who was a professional photographer, doing very well, I think, in New York City, and she was depressed, and she got more and more depressed and showed her photographs to her psychiatrist. And these were photographs in black and white of very dismal scenes of people homeless and suffering on the street and so forth. She decided to take some antidepressants, and her creativity expressed itself in a very different way. And suddenly she was taking happy color pictures of couples holding hands and this sort of thing. And she had to make the decision, which is really me, and how do I do that? it's affecting my creativity one way or the other. And it can be a tough decision for both the person with mood disorder and not. So I would say, see how much you can channel that creativity into other areas that it might be still there for. And if not, maybe it's worth talking to your doctor about if it's a really important part of life.
I don't really want to go back to the mania, but...
Yeah, no, but you can tweak it or something. I agree. You don't want to mess with things a lot, and definitely don't mess with things without your doctor. Yeah, so it's a hard one.
One of the things that I've found is that sometimes if you feel that your creativity is lost, simply trying another medium can be effective. I was recently hospitalized for the first time, and I'm ordinarily a watercolorist. And my daughter, who lives in Texas, expressed me in the hospital some pastels and charcoal and gave me to do so. And I just, kind of sat there and made a few slashes, and soon I was actually drawing people and using, titanium because it was different and it helped. It had an automatic spark that got to me in a way that maybe watercolors or my journal or something might not have had at that time.
Yes, it's a very good point. Sure. Sometimes other media can be very powerful. So other artistic media. So for example, this woman shared that she, during a difficult time, used pastels and drew, where writing wasn't the thing that called to her at that point. And that other media can be very powerful for us as well, and I definitely second that. If one isn't working, play and find what does speak to you at that time. Julia Cameron's book, The Artist's Way, is also one that I recommend highly. It's the name and information is also here in the bibliography. It's a very powerful book. When she wrote it several years ago, I don't believe she herself was aware that she had bipolar disorder, and she since has written several books about her illness and how it relates to her creativity.
I met a man yesterday, I don't know if he's here, his name is Neil, but he writes with a fountain pen, and I noticed the fountain pen because nobody writes with a fountain pen anymore. But he said that it's one of the most wonderful ways to write is with a fountain pen. And then he even had a journal. It was a black journal, I think it's called a Bond, B-O-N-D or something like that. And you order it from Minneapolis or something, but it's the paper. It's some weird paper that is very smooth to a fountain pen. Okay. So I guess the tactile of finding a pen that you like to write with might be a really good idea too.
Yeah, I think for some of us, the ritual of getting started writing can be very important, and I think one way that can be demonstrated is that for some of us, having the perfect lucky pen can be crucial, and the perfect lucky journal can be really important. Now, for others of us, whatever $1 steno pad from Target and a ballpoint pen is just fine. Others like that fountain pen and that perfect journal for them. My feeling is play with it. If one calls out to you, sure, why not?